All right, let's jump right into this explainer and completely demystify the Canadian RSSP, because we really need to reveal why strategic investing is absolutely critical for your future. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep, structured look at one of the most powerful, yet honestly frequently misunderstood financial tools we have here in Canada, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. We're going to break down the mechanics, uncover the hidden pitfalls, and face the exact mathematical realities you have to confront if you actually want to retire comfortably. Which brings us to a tough question. Before we even look at the specific rules, I want you to stop and ask yourself, can your current savings plan truly withstand the mathematical reality of retirement? It's incredibly common to set a savings goal based on what things cost today. But as we're going to see, relying on today's numbers, that's a really dangerous trap. We aren't just saving for a static number. We are trying to lock in our purchasing power decades from now. So let's get right to it. Section 1. Inside the Canadian RRSP. Let's establish the basic ground rules and the core mechanics of how this account actually works in the real world. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly what tax-deferred means. It's literally the engine driving this entire financial tool. When you contribute money into an RSSP, that exact amount is deducted straight from your taxable annual income for that year. Simply put, you do not pay tax on that portion of your income today. You then invest that money, and you just let it compound and grow inside the account, completely sheltered from annual taxes. But, and this is a big but, the catch is that when you eventually withdraw that money in the future, the government treats that withdrawal as taxable income, and withholding tax is applied right then and there. So it's really a dual nature. You get an incredible immediate benefit, a massive tax break today that can potentially drop you into a lower tax bracket. But, there is a future cost. You are effectively making a handshake agreement with the government to pay taxes on those withdrawals down the road. It is not tax-free forever, folks. It is tax-deferred. And because of that, here is a pretty harsh reality about how unforgiving the RRSP can be if you use it incorrectly. It makes a notoriously poor emergency fund. Seriously, because of the way withdrawals are taxed, if you pull money out for a sudden expense, not only is that amount slapped onto your taxable income for the year, which, yikes, could trigger a huge tax bill, but you also permanently lose that contribution space. Unlike a tax-free savings account, or TFSA, where your contribution room magically comes back the following year, an RRSP withdrawal permanently destroys that room. Once it's gone, it is gone for good. Moving on to Section 2, Early Withdrawals and Exceptions. Now, even though this vehicle is strictly designed for retirement, there are two very specific government programs that actually let you access this money early without facing those immediate tax penalties. First up, we have the Home Buyers Plan. This allows an eligible person to withdraw up to $60,000 completely tax-free to purchase a first home. Pretty great, right? Second is the Lifelong Learning Plan, which lets you take out up to $10,000 a year with a $20,000 lifetime limit to fund education for yourself, your spouse, or your common law partner. But you really need to notice the strict repayment timelines here. For the Home Buyers Plan, you have 15 years to repay that money back into your RRSP. For the Learning Plan, you get 10 years. If you miss those repayments, well, the required amount gets added right back to your taxable income for that year. The government is essentially letting you borrow from your future self, but they absolutely demand you pay yourself back. All right, Section 3, Strategic Ages and Milestones. So, a big question. When exactly should you be pouring money into this account instead of, say, your TFSA or paying down a mortgage? Well, there's no single universal timeline, but we can map out a highly effective framework. If you're under 40 but have a very high annual income, the RRSP is fantastic for lowering your immediate tax bracket. However, for a person earning an average income, it often makes a lot more sense to prioritize maxing out your TFSA first. Then, as you hit your early 40s, you pivot. That's when you begin making much larger RRSP contributions. By age 50, your retirement time horizon is shrinking rapidly. At this milestone, the strategy typically shifts to pushing a massive 50 to 70% of your long-term savings directly into your RRSP. Also, just a quick aside, if you happen to have a generous employer pension plan, prioritizing your TFSA early on becomes even more critical before you start relying heavily on the RRSP. But remember, The savings phase doesn't last forever. It officially ends at age 71. Yep, by December 31st of the year you turn 71, your RRSP must legally transform into an RRIF, a registered retirement income fund. You can't contribute a single dollar anymore, and you are literally forced to start taking a minimum mandatory withdrawal every single year. The account fundamentally shifts from a saving structure right into a forced retirement income structure. Which brings us to Section 4, the hidden tax of inflation. Now that we thoroughly understand the mechanics and the timeline of the RRSP, we really need to talk about the absolute biggest threat to your deferred savings. This is a massive reality check. Seriously, how much money do you actually need in retirement to maintain your lifestyle? We tossed around numbers like $500,000 or $1 million all the time, but the true answer is deeply, deeply tied to the historical reality of inflation. Based on Statistics Canada data, the average inflation rate has hovered around roughly 2.4% over the last 20 years. Now, on a year-to-year basis, 2.4% might not sound like a full-blown crisis, but over the span of a multi-decade career and retirement, it is a silent compounder that dramatically eats away at your purchasing power. Let me break down exactly what this mathematical pressure looks like. If you expect your retirement to last roughly 10 years, the math dictates that for every single dollar of annual income you want in the future, you basically have to save $18 today. Just think about that for a second. $18 saved right now, just to guarantee one measly dollar of annual purchasing power during a short, decade-long retirement? And oh, it gets much steeper. If your retirement stretches out to 20 years, that requirement absolutely explodes. You would need to save roughly $47 today for every $1 of future annual income. 47 to 1. This is the staggering, hidden pressure created by inflation over long periods of time. Let's look at Section 5, John's 2-decade retirement plan. Let's bring all this abstract math down to earth with a really concrete example. Meet John. John is 45 years old and is just starting to seriously save in his RRSP. He plans to retire at age 65, and he's planning for a 20-year retirement horizon. Now, John has a very modest goal. He simply wants his RRSP to generate $20,000 a year of pre-tax income. That doesn't sound too difficult, right? Well, while $20,000 sounds easy, here is the harsh mathematical reality. When we factor in a slightly more conservative 3% average inflation rate over those next decades, John will actually need a staggering $940,000 in his RRSP just to safely maintain the purchasing power of that $20,000 lifestyle. Almost $1 million. If John tries to hit nearly $1 million through his annual cash contributions alone, the yearly deposit required would be completely unrealistic for an average earner. This staggering gap is exactly why you cannot afford to play it entirely safe with long-term retirement funds. If you just hoard cash, GICs, or low-yield bonds inside your RRSP, sure, you preserve stability, but you completely fail to generate the growth needed to offset decades of inflation. To survive this inflationary pressure and reach figures like John's $940,000, you are almost forced to allocate a portion of your portfolio toward higher growth assets. For long horizons, this typically means broader market index funds, ETFs, or equities in large-cap companies. Think industry giants like Amazon, Apple, or Shopify. You absolutely need assets that have the historical potential to significantly outpace inflation. And that brings us to our final takeaway. I'll leave you with this thought. Do not let the short-term fear of market volatility blind you to the catastrophic long-term risk of your savings being completely destroyed by inflation. Yes, the stock market goes up and down, that's just volatility, but true risk is waking up at age 75 and realizing your money simply cannot buy what you need it to buy. The Canadian RRSP is an incredible tool, but it requires a structured timeline, a solid understanding of taxes, and an investment strategy that faces inflation head-on. So looking at your own retirement horizon today, are you investing to simply preserve your cash, or are you truly investing to preserve your future lifestyle?